Welcome back to Mental Fitness Stories, Episode 3, Part 2. The interview with Dave Obwald, mental fitness on and off the field. This one is going to cover some great tips and techniques. Super excited for you to hear those and get a chance to take a look at them as well. Whether it's on the podcast platforms, go down in that description. There's links. There's going to be descriptions of the techniques. Also in YouTube as well. Scroll down there and grab those because it's going to be fun. I'm excited to be able to share this second part with you. So with that, here is Episode 3, Part 2. One of the things I was curious about is you're like, pulling in your story and pulling in other stories. I mean, kind of hearing from you too, maybe, is there maybe a little, like a tip or two that you kind of like, I hear I think the percentage piece, right? Like that was one of them. And that's beautiful. Like getting a chance to say, okay, hey, like, let's take a second here. And like, how much do you actually think you're in this, whether it's sage, right? Or kind of positive thinking, right?
Yeah. So that's one of the things I'll do with an athlete. Is if I'm working with them over time, is we'll go, all right, let's take your last game.
Yep.
Give me a percentage score of, what percent of the time do you think your mind was working in a positive way for you and versus the negative way? And I just give them, a 0 to 100 scale. And they'll be like, oh man, I think it was like 60-40. I'm like, okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
What was the 60 like?
Yeah.
Oh man, I felt free. I felt like I was being able to be creative. I felt like I wasn't up in my head, questioning everything. All right, tell me about the 40. Oh, well, man, early on in the game, this thing happens. And, because of that, my action, we gave up a goal, thinking of a soccer player, right?
Right.
And,
Yep.
And then I go, okay, well, let's talk about that. How quickly did you how did you respond mentally to that? How long did you dwell on that space? What were your responses internally to that? What were your responses externally to that? What did the judge sound like? What did these other voices in your head sound like? How did you respond to your teammates after that? And we're just starting to actually use the actual gameplay as the teacher. And to go, okay, well, if we had to do over again, if we could rewind the tape, that's another trick, right? Is preempting the next saboteurs that are let's preempt the next mistake. Okay.
Yes.
How would you want to do that differently?
Yep.
What would you want? How would you want to respond? Okay, well, let's practice that right now mentally. Let's get in front of it. And then we'll have them, do some like 3x5 cards for their pregame warm-up where they remind themselves of these commitments that they've made of how they want to respond differently in those moments. And then one of the other, I guess, I don't know, tips and tricks, is literally is sides of our brain that are operating. When we're caught in that negative spiral, we're using a whole fear-based side of our brain.
Yes.
And in order to shift, there is actual neuroscience that says that intense focus for 10 seconds on something that's bodily helps to shift our brains out of this mindset of fear and allows it to operate more in the other side of our brains, which is focused on, again, curiosity, laser focus, action, all this kind of thing. So we'll teach athletes in those moments, like how do you, in the gameplay, develop these ways of 10-second focus where you're like, grabbing a piece of your jersey and feeling it between your fingers, taking 3 deep breaths, which is about 10 seconds. And to be able to shift your mind in that moment. Now they have to practice those things outside of gameplay to build the muscle, right?
To build the muscle. The mental fitness. Yes.
To build the muscle. Because just like I, tell an athlete, hey, you're going to be in the batting cage. Why are you in the batting cage? So that in the game, you have the reps in. Yeah. And that makes sense to every athlete. They're like, of course, why would I expect myself to be able to hit a 90-mile-an-hour fastball if I have not practiced hitting 90-mile-an-hour fastballs or sometimes 95-mile-an-hour fastballs so that fastball seems slower in the game than what I've done in practice, right?
Big time.
Mentally, mentally, why don't we think the same way? If I haven't practiced outside of that moment, doing repetitions mentally on these, what we would call, Shirzad calls PQ reps, which is this 10-second intense focus, but like doing 10-minute sessions of that in the morning, 10-minute sessions, doing a session of 3 minutes in your pregame warm-up, right? So that in those moments, you are increasing your ability to respond with heavier and heavier circumstances. Because whereas a minor mistake, like I missed a jump shot. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm getting, that's like a 10-pound weight where I'm like, oh, I'm getting better at not letting that hijack the next time down the court, and I can move right into next set. Well, but what if you in soccer gave up an own goal? That's a heavier weight. You kicked it into your own net, right?
Yes.
That's like 245s on the bar, right? And you're like,
it's big.
Oh, or you missed the free throw at the end of the game that would have won it for your team.
Yeah.
That's a heavier weight to not wallow in that for the rest of the season or for days and days and days and days, versus being able to go, how do I convert that into a gift and opportunity? Oh man. Well, actually, by doing more and more mental repetitions, not only am I going to be able to hit that shot next time, but I'm going to be ready for the next 3-pointer at the buzzer. This is a gift to me to know that I need to get stronger here. Or my legs were tired at the end of the game. Oh man, this is going to drive me to the weight room. So that next time my legs aren't as tired when I'm hitting that free throw, to where everything's smooth. I haven't shot free throws in the gym just by myself, and this is going to drive me to 100 reps a day. Because that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have missed that free throw. So now I'm going to go from a 60% free throw shooter to a 75% free throw shooter just based on that one miss. And I'm going to convert it into a gift and opportunity.
Dude, I mean, you're talking, like, there's so many things, right, that you were mentioning down. I had to write them down. I was like, okay, wait a second. I got to get this one down. I got to get this one down. But dude, I mean, it's beautiful because you're rolling through like the benefits of something like mental fitness, right? Like how, it really is something that is just transformational, and yes, on the field, on the court, in the pool, whatever it is, it's transformational there, and then I was thinking as you were going through it is like, like kind of asking the questions, well, why am I doing these PQ reps, right? Why am I breaking up this negative dialogue, that's happening in these ways? I mean, you're answering them too. As I'm asking these questions in my head, you're answering them, you're doing this to
totally. And I would say this is, I used to think when those negative thoughts would come that you're supposed to like fight them, stop it, quit thinking that. Well, try it. I couldn't, I mean, I hope you have a better chance than I did. But I think what walking through this process for myself and realizing it's a lot less about stop it. And it's more of a grace-filled process of acknowledgement. Of course you'd be here. I made a mistake. Of course the judge is going to come. Yes, here you are.
Yes.
Oh, Wizard of Oz, the mask is pulled back.
Yes.
You're just a little dude. Of course, you're trying to help me, but it's not helpful. And you acknowledge. And then you just shift back to a place of like focus for 10 seconds on something bodily. And you don't have to say, stop it. No, but as you literally feel it, acknowledge it, and shift, you're creating, neuroscience says you're creating new neural pathways where you used to operate, an event would happen and the negative thoughts, an event would happen and the judgments, an event would happen and people pleasing would come out. And what you're doing in those moments of like mental fitness is you're going, an event happens, and now the thicker neural pathway is starting to grow in a different direction. It comes through practice. And every time you shift from this way of thinking, the negative way of thinking, by an intense focus for 10 seconds and shifting to this stage perspective that everything can be converted into gift and opportunity, you are growing mental muscle every time you do that. So it's actually now the negative thoughts are gifts to actually help you grow. Because when a new negative thought comes and you shift away from it, boom, you hit a rep. Like you just pounded a bench press to
Yes, you
get
did.
stronger.
Yes,
And
you
so
did.
you're using that thought as a gift and opportunity. And the more you do that, the more reps you get. So, hey, bring on the negative thoughts, because you're going to, you know, like, it's like, and as you do that, these will decrease.
Yeah.
And operating in this way will increase over time.
Over time.
But it's not hey, I did that thing, I read that book, and it's done. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Insight is very little of the transformation.
Man, you're right. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's the idea of that fitness portion, that idea of like muscles, right? Physically, you know, especially whether it's athletics or most people, right? I think they understand that like physical spot, to where if I do these reps and I practice these reps physically, I'm going to be stronger, right? Like, and that resilience you're talking about, right? Each thing's, because like, it's such a, like, it's a comical thing that saboteurs and judges, right? They kind of come at you in this way of painting a reality that's not true, but you believe it, right? Like, I believe it. I believe the reality that I'm supposed to be perfect, right? I'm supposed to throw a strike every time I throw, right? That's the way that I'm supposed to do it, but it's not the reality. Like, that is not reality. Life, right? Yeah. And then you start to shift and change out of that. And man, I think you mentioned the feeling portion. One of the things that I can recognize is that different feel when, in this case, when you're talking about the sage, there is a breath to it. Oh, yeah. There's like a freedom to it, instead of the constant, like, oh no, what's going to happen next? You know, like this, I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
Well, I'll often tell athletes, I'll say, hey, find a picture from when you were young, you know, like when you just started playing a sport you love.
Yep.
And so, you know, if it's a soccer player, they're, you know, pulling out their, you know, under 8 soccer picture. And I'm like, hey, tell me what that under 8 version of yourself was thinking when they were on the field. And they get a big smile on their face, and they're like, oh, they were just playing. Dude. They were like, it's a game. And they're like, dude, I was like into it. I was aggressive. I was like trying stuff. I didn't care. I wasn't thinking what the coach thought. I wasn't thinking about what these other players thought. And often they were very good athletes early on. And they're like, dude, I felt like I could beat anybody on the field at any given moment. And like, I was just going for it. And I was like, what if more and more of that came back? And they're like, oh, and then they would usually say, that's what I feel like when I'm operating like in freedom. Versus slavery, right? It's like freedom and slavery, right? Yeah. And they're like, that's what it feels like. And we try to get back to, it's a game. Like and it has gone so far past that, where they're now playing for their worth. They're now playing for their identity. They're now playing for people liking them. They're now playing for some unreasonable standard in their head of perfection. And that's just not fun anymore. Every game, their stuff is on the line again, you know?
I just like, right. It sucks the joy, right? It just like kills it. It crushes it. It's a killjoy, no doubt. Right.
And then they're grumpy teammates. And then they become victims, where they're barking at their if it's the coach's fault, it's the ref's fault, it's my teammate's fault. It's it's too cold. It's like, man, I have to like be the victim, you know, like all these things come out when we live in that space. So
man, I mean, I love that, right? Like that picture, you know, and I mean, that's such a powerful exercise, right? And walking through, we'll see if I put mine up or not on this actual podcast, but dude, I have this picture that I've used, you know, in that exercise, and like, it's literally me, you know, it's like one of those team pictures, basketball in my hands, right? But I have like, you know, the shortest shorts, right? Ooh. I have the long socks with like these big old sneakers, and
it was a rough era for us.
Dude, and my shirt is tucked into my shorts. It's like, dude, and I laugh at that one. It's just beautiful though, right? Like I know the energy that I was bringing during that time. And, you know, and I think part of it too is, you know, I know how I would talk to that person, You know, that kid, I know what I would bring to that kid. I know that there's so much, whether it's, you know, wisdom and kindness and just joy that's a part of that interaction versus how that like saboteurs talk, how the judges talk. Like, I mean, it's just it's a powerful exercise, man. I mean, I absolutely love it. And I mean, I'm like, seriously, I'm like marking these things down as you're going, right? I'm just kind of, I'm writing them down because I love it, you know, and I love the ability to be able to share, you know, what something like mental fitness can really do, you know, in your life. And, you know, I know for us, we're focusing more on, you know, whether it's athletes, you know, in that way and working with them in this, but also being right and living. And I still call myself an athlete, even though it might not be like, right.
Me too. Yeah.
Right. It's not going to leave. It's not going to leave.
No.
But I mean, too, just being able to see how this impacts life.
Everything. Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, how we do anything is how we do everything. It's one of my favorite quotes. So if it shows up for you this way in an athletic event, welcome to how you do all of life. Athletics brings stuff out. It highlights things. But the way I show up on a field is the same way I'm going to show up in my marriage. The way I show up in a field is the same way I'm showing up in a classroom, you know? And so the beauty of that, right? I had something happen over Christmas with my wife and I. We did some house remodel stuff recently, and it was way more than we wanted to do financially. And finances is like, man, the saboteurs come out for me with finances sometimes, right?
Big time.
And dude, I was, you know, talk about hijack, right? You know, the bill came in and I was like, this is 3 times the amount that we planned to spend. And it was, you know, 3 times the time we wanted to spend on it and all this. And immediately the judge came out. Dave, you should have planned better. You're awful. Judge the guy that was doing the work. Judge, right? I wanted to avoid it, wanted to be the victim. All this stuff came, right? Well, now, again, knowing what I've learned, I would love to say I touched it for a second and I was done. No, I felt like some big, heavy plates, but I also have grown, right? So we're in that moment to go, oh, how does this get converted potentially into a gift and opportunity? Well, it has led to, I mean, it was like a couple weeks of tension, and that aligned with my wife considering like, I don't know if I want to work anymore. I'm like, oh, no, you have to, you know? And so honestly, the storm came, right? And but now watching on the tail end of having that perspective, gosh, anything can be converted into a gift and opportunity. What knowledge, what power, what inspiration can come from it. I've seen so much good in my wife's and I's relationship, in our direction, even financially with how we're planning now, because we wouldn't have had to, minus this thing that we saw. I feel like for the next 3 years, this is going to be the greatest gift we could have been given. But in the moment, it felt awful, right?
Horrible.
But it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing as a mistake on the field. How we respond to it, right? Could it have been labeled as bad? Could I still be dwelling on it? Could I still be just in the negative mindset about it? And whatever I feed, whatever I believe is true is going to be true. And I could believe that, and I could still be living in that. Or I could be watching it be converted into a gift and opportunity, which I am.
That's beautiful, right? Like you just see it, you see the way, you know, that you're talking about it, the way that it happens, yes, on and off the field, but that like off the field piece, you know. And I've got like a few things that pop up, and we're gonna have to probably do like part 2, part 3, part 4, maybe part 5. We'll see, but it's just gonna like be a thing. But as you're talking about it, that transition, you know, and what it and how it impacts life, because I you know, the reality too is, as an athlete, your career is only so long. And as you are practicing and building these things, I mean, even before this maybe term of mental fitness for me, I recognized how much I learned from sports, you know, and what's that's done for me over time. You know, I will say the positive to that and negative to it as well, right? But just recognizing in this like spot of mental fitness, I think how you know, I love the way you use the word transformational. You know, how transformational it can be, you know, and from the science of it, you'd bring it in the brain, right? The networks, the neural networks, and, you know, how those grow to, you know, just, I think as well, how much of joy and peace and happiness you can experience within, the pain and the hurt, because they all exist, right? Like, it's like all of those things exist: pain, hurt, sadness, loneliness. Like, they're all there. Neither, in my opinion, I'd say neither right nor wrong. They just exist, and they're there to help us.
Yes.
And
it's part of the way we've been made and created, right? And every human, I used to think, oh, I'm so unique, like no one else deals with this stuff like I do. You start talking about it and you're like, oh, everyone's got a judge in their head. Oh, everyone has these saboteurs that attack them. Oh, like, wow, I'm not alone, which is huge. And so even for an athlete to just listen to something like this and go, oh, every athlete deals with that. Wow. And you start doing workshops with teams and that sort of thing. And then every athlete identifies what their judge sounds like. And there's just like an empathy that grows in the room of like, it's hard to be a human. It's a joy to be a human. And it's hard to be a human. And collectively to carry that creates empathy, which is a big thing on a sports team, right? Because man, one person makes a mistake. If the whole team understands what that person that made the mistake is going through mentally, oh, what a gift, right? For that team to then be able to go, I know what that feels like. How do we want to respond collectively? And then we have a positive contagion happening, growing us towards right action together versus a spiral downhill. Or that person's beating themselves up, and then the rest of the team is beating them up too. And goes either way. Not helpful. Or we start comparing ourselves. I mean, judgment wants to compare, right? Teammates are comparing themselves to each other, always constantly needing to be the best, need to work for my stats. I mean, so much of it when you can shift, right? And there's so much good that can happen on a team. In a workplace, all this.
Right. In life, in a partnership, in a marriage, right? And so many of these. And I love that you're bringing the community aspect, here, and what that means, because I can picture, man, I know the feel of different team chemistry, right? Like growing up as an athlete, right? That word, let's get team chemistry, right? And I know the feel of that, but looking back, dude, I can probably more now pinpoint what that actually meant. And I think you nailed a huge part of that, is like this empathy, this connection that happens, especially in the moments of resilience, right? In the moments of mistakes. Like, do guys or whoever it is, do they come together in those moments? Or do they start to, go at each other? And I've been a part of both plenty of times. I've experienced it. So, man, let me do this. I know just time-wise for us, being able to, and like I said, I mean, we're going to be having multiple parts here. This is just going to be a thing. We're just going to roll it more and more and more. So I'm excited for the future. But one thing I was just going to do real quick for listeners and whatnot is just kind of go through and make sure I nailed some of these like kind of tips. And if you had either like something you wanted to add to them, right? Or if you wanted to go through and maybe, because I was like, seriously, I was going down them, right? I was trying to get them in. But one of the things that I was looking at here as I was writing them. So I think one of the ones you mentioned right out the gate was, I kind of threw it in as like this percentage exercise is what I threw in, but gathering percentage, right? And how would you say it when you're doing that percentage exercise? It's the.
So, I mean, I think these are all things that, John will throw in the show notes, right? But there's an assessment that you can take that gives you just a baseline score. It's called a PQ assessment, right? Positive intelligence assessment. And you can take it based on, okay, I want to take it based on my athletics or just in life in general, right? And so you take it, it's going to give you a baseline score. Your goal is that you would grow that score to 75 or above. That means that you're cycling in a positive way versus cycling in a negative way in whatever environment you're a part of as an athlete. Second thing that's also an assessment that John can throw on there for you guys as well is a saboteur assessment. So if you're going, I don't even know what these voices are in my head that happen, I haven't identified them yet. Great first stage is take a little assessment, and it's going to have some descriptions around these different aspects of our minds that work in a negative way. And usually the judge is always there, but also kind of a cluster of unique things just for you. And this is going to help you get clear on what that cluster is. And then the more you can get clear, then you have the ability to go, oh, that's not helpful. Like, no. I know that thing's trying to serve me well. It's not. And so you can get clear on that. And then those other two things would be then being able to practice the sage perspective, right? Which is that everything has an opportunity to be converted into a gift and opportunity. And in that, also being able to practice these repetitions, these positive PQ repetitions, right? PQ 10 seconds, intense focus on some tactile thing with breathing, right? So breathing three deep breaths. While, rubbing two fingers together, while, touching the side of my jersey and feeling how the cloth feels. So I put all my intense focus there. So there's practice around that. And then that third aspect is to be able to then, do things like grow this idea of sage, or, operating in love, not fear. Right. And so one small exercise you could do there, grab that childhood picture of you as a young athlete. And just like sit it in front of you. Who was this person? How did they play? How were they free? And just meditate on those things, and to be able to then write a few thoughts, you can turn them into I am statements. I was this, I was this, and throw them on a 3x5 card. Throw it in your shoes, so that when you put your shoes on every time you pull out that 3x5 card, remind yourself of who you are. And you can preempt the saboteur. And I know these thoughts are going to come today, and here's how I want to respond to them. And so you're growing that sage mind. And so really those three aspects are really some ways you could even start from this podcast, just using little things. And again, there's ways to dive deeper. And that's why, working with someone like John, working with someone like myself, that's where you can, because again, insight's part of it, but practice takes a little time. Right. And so you can practice the things we've talked about today and start implementing them. But often it's time, it's helpful to have someone who's walking side by side with you through some of that as well.
For sure. No, that's awesome, man. You nailed them. Those are the ones I was thinking. I had them down, and man, they're just awesome exercises. I hope, whoever, watching, listening and whatnot, gets a chance to, whether it's practice them or just explore, get a chance to be curious about them and go from there. So Dave, let me do this. Is there a way or some ways to be able to, whether it is get a hold of or follow or, kind of find you if you want to be found? I will admit, right? Some people don't. They're like, I'm good. I don't need to be found right now. This is it. So,
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. In the show notes below, you can find a link to one of my website pages, and there's a way to sign up for a free counsel, free call, right? So where it's just like, hey, let's explore what you're wanting to work on. And then what I often will take people through, if they're interested, if it feels beneficial to them, is I take people through a 6-week intensive where we really drill each of the things we talked about today to where it goes from insight into muscle memory, into ways of practice. And it gives a guided way of practice that really will set someone up with a foundation that keeps carrying them through the rest of their athletic career, and with daily practices and weekly practices that are really going to grow mental fitness, for them as an athlete and beyond, beyond athletics as well.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, those will be there for sure, be listed, man. If for sure, right? Anyone interested, in that sense, definitely be able to take a look. And so, man, Dave, I love it. I love this time, just getting a chance to, talk about something that, I've appreciated as you and I have just connected more and more, and whether it's just have a conversation like this, many other conversations, but way we've been able to, I know for me, you've been able to kind of walk me through, and learn more and more about this. And, man, from the early days back in college to man, it just keeps rolling. So it's beautiful, man. I appreciate it big time. And we will be, I'm hoping, doing this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, John, what a gift, man. Thanks for inviting me. I know it's fun to be a co-learner. We're practitioners, but we're also learners. And so it's fun to continue to be on that transformation journey with you. And excited to see where it keeps going.
Dude, awesome. I appreciate it for sure, Dave. Thanks for listening / watching to Mental Fitness Stories with John Steele. Remember to stay curious without judgment during your journey towards mental fitness. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on this transformative journey through Mental Fitness Stories with John Steele. If you resonated with today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform of your choice. Remember, your story is important, and so is your mental well-being. If you have a personal mental fitness journey you'd like to share or topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes, reach out to us on social media or through our website. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations, expert insights, and practical tips to help you cultivate a resilient mind. Until next time, take care of your mind, nurture your inner dialogue, and prioritize your self-care. Remember, you are not alone, and your mental fitness and well-being is worth the investment. Thanks for being a part of the Mental Fitness Stories community.